When my fiancé's phone rang during dinner, I stumbled upon a secret he'd hidden for 12 years. A secret that could shatter the wedding I'd dreamed would last forever. My name is Sophie. I'm 35, and I was in the middle of enjoying the happiness of preparing for my wedding. During dinner, John's phone rang. As I reached for the glass of water beside me, I noticed him tense up for a split second. Only when he realized I just wanted a sip of water did that tension in his eyes ease. Maybe aware that his reaction had been too obvious, he got up and said he needed to go to the restroom. I pretended not to notice anything unusual, smiling and nodding. After 12 years together, I knew every little thing about him. That one moment was enough for me to know he was hiding something. Last month, we had just registered our marriage, and the invitations were ready. I didn't want everything to fall apart, so I decided to watch quietly. After dinner, through the reflection on the TV screen, I saw him secretly texting. When I was about to call him over to help with the invitations, he quickly said, "Babe, Grayson says there's an issue with the project. I've got to head to the office." Then he kissed my cheek, not even giving me the chance to respond, before rushing out. I stood by the window, watching his figure run to the car. It was already 9 at night. I thought for a moment, then called Grayson. On the other end, Grayson was clearly flustered. A problem with the project. Oh, right. If I still had any hope left in this 12-year relationship, that phone call with Grayson shattered it completely. What could possibly make John, someone who hated lying, come up with an excuse to go out? From that moment, I began quietly observing his every move. That's how I noticed he was staying later and later at work. Even when he came home, he'd say just a few casual words, then claim he was tired and retreat to the bedroom. There were nights when I woke up to find him still awake, glued to his phone. I didn't want to make a scene, so I gently told him to rest earlier. Unexpectedly, he used that as a chance to suggest we sleep separately, saying he was busy with work lately and didn't want to disturb my sleep. My heart went completely cold. I didn't have solid proof yet, but everything in his recent behavior told me that 9 times out of 10, he was having an affair. To get closer to the truth, I decided to stay silent for now. His team did have an ongoing project lately, with constant overtime. In the past, I'd always sympathized with how hard he worked, never letting him worry about the house. But now I knew I couldn't just let him carry on like this. I started looking for him more often. Like today, I went furniture shopping and, around noon, deliberately called him, asking him to come pick me up. On the phone, his voice faltered for a moment, but he still answered gently as always. "Wait for me a bit." John's subtlety was exactly this. He might not love me anymore, but he still wouldn't let me realize it outright. He came quickly. The moment I opened the car door, I caught a faint, unfamiliar scent. Pretending not to notice, I got in, and as soon as I sat down, I saw the passenger seat had been adjusted. Looking at his attentive eyes, full of supposed affection, I had a sudden urge to slap him hard. "My phone's dead. Can I borrow yours for a bit?" I smiled at him. As expected, his smile stiffened for a fraction of a second, but he still handed me the phone. Out of habit, I entered my birthday to unlock it. After 3 wrong tries, the phone locked me out for 30 seconds. The truth was, borrowing his phone was just a test. But in the end, the only one who felt the pain was me. I once thought my biggest mistake was quitting my job to be a housewife when we got married, just as John wanted. His company had stabilized, enough to give us a comfortable life. Blinded by his sweet words, thinking about our 12 years together, I chose to respect his decision. After I left my job, I had plenty of time to prepare for the wedding. I once felt lucky and happy that even without an income, he still treated me the same. But now, because I stayed home full-time, I had more time to notice every little thing John did. This morning, after breakfast, he kissed my cheek before leaving. I smiled back, but the moment he stepped out of the house, I quickly wiped the spot hard. Just thinking that those lips might have touched another woman's, maybe even done worse, made me sick. I secretly followed him. His car headed south of the city and eventually stopped at a row of upscale townhouses. Since unfamiliar cars weren't allowed into this gated community, I had to sit in a cafe across the street and wait. This morning, he told me he'd be in meetings all day and wouldn't be able to use his phone. I had no idea when his company had moved into a luxury townhouse. Luckily, he didn't stay there long. About 10 minutes later, his car pulled out again, this time with a woman in the passenger seat. The window rolled down, and I immediately recognized her. Ironically, it was the very woman John used to despise, Sarah Evans. Sarah was 2 years older than us, one of the first employees John hired. She had once flirted with him. On late nights, when John would share the affectionate texts she sent, his eyes had only been filled with disdain. I kept following their car. Today was Valentine's Day. I saw him and Sarah watching a movie, strolling through the streets, always hand in hand, like any couple in love, doing all the sweet things lovers do. The gentle smile he gave her cut deep into me. Many times, I wanted to run up and confront him, to see what his face would look like if caught in the act. Would he panic? Feel guilty? But in the end, I did nothing. I just quietly took pictures of them together. Then I called him. He stopped walking, instinctively glancing at Sarah. She seemed to instantly guess it was me. She smiled. Moments later, he hung up and sent me a text. "Honey, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back when I'm done." He put his phone away, wrapped his arm around Sarah's shoulders, and the two of them walked into a hotel. It felt like being slapped in the face hundreds of times, humiliation and fury flooding me. I didn't have the courage to walk in, afraid of seeing something even worse, but my mind told me I had to do it. Through the thin walls of the hotel room, I could hear John and Sarah together, every sound tearing my heart apart. Like a machine, I held my phone up and recorded it all. I don't know how much time passed before the room finally went quiet. Half an hour later, the door opened, and the two of them stepped out. I kept following them. By lunchtime, John was introducing Sarah to her friends, another couple. I stood there like an outsider, watching through my camera lens as they laughed and chatted. Then suddenly, Sarah looked straight into my lens. She wasn't surprised. In fact, she smiled with satisfaction, as if deliberately provoking me. I was certain Sarah wanted me to know she existed, to push me into leaving John. Looking at the photos I'd taken over the past few days, my husband holding another woman's hand so tightly, I laughed bitterly at myself. I used to think that if my marriage to John ever ended, I wouldn't take a cent from him. But if the reason for the divorce was his infidelity, then he shouldn't blame me for not being polite. My eyes lingered on the pristine white wedding invitation sitting on the coffee table, once a source of pure happiness, now nothing but a cruel joke. Looking at the picture on the card, where the two of us leaned into each other so tenderly, I just wanted to tear it all to pieces. A sudden knock on the door pulled me back to reality. I hesitated before walking to the door. It was nearly dark, and I had no idea who would be coming to see me at this hour. Looking through the peephole, I felt a wave of dizziness. Sarah was standing outside, a bright smile on her face. She wore an off-shoulder top with skinny jeans, simple but stylish. In contrast, I was in my home clothes, barefaced, looking completely outmatched against her overflowing confidence. Forcing a smile, I opened the door. She stepped in with a provocative grin. "Hi, Sophie. I'm John's coworker. He's been really good to me." I smiled back, hiding my anger, and invited her inside. "Oh, that reminds me. There was a time when John would come home complaining that work wasn't going well, that his employees were nothing but trouble, that he didn't have a capable assistant. I remember wondering what was going on. I let out an even more natural laugh. My instincts told me Sarah hadn't told John she was coming here today, so I made no move to call him. In fact, I quietly looked forward to seeing his reaction when he found her here. While I was cooking in the kitchen, I caught her out of the corner of my eye staring at our wedding photo in the living room. A moment later, she walked over with a cheerful smile. "Let me help you. I love cooking. I sometimes bring John lunch at work." I had to stop myself from slapping her, instead casually handing her a piece of raw meat. She hesitated but still took it. I went on. "John loves making friends. My mother-in-law always said John hangs out with nobodies." Sarah's expression stiffened. I acted like I didn't notice and continued calmly. "But looking at you, I can tell you're not that type of person." She stayed quiet, turned the water on higher, and changed the subject. "Everyone says John is such a family man." My hand trembled slightly as I stirred the food with a spatula. Just as I was about to answer, I heard the sound of the front door unlocking from the hallway. John's voice drew closer. "Honey, I'm home." His footsteps stopped at the kitchen entrance, and his words cut off abruptly. Silence fell over the room. I figured he was probably scared enough to faint right now. Seeing his face go pale gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. I smiled and broke the silence. "Surprised, aren't you?" He looked like he'd been struck by lightning, panic written all over his face, his instinct pushing him to reach out for me. I sidestepped casually and said, "Sarah said she wanted to thank you for helping her." I nudged him toward the kitchen. "Perfect timing. Sit and chat with her. I'll go downstairs to pick up a delivery." Leaving them both in the kitchen, I went to the bedroom. I set my tablet to record and hid it on a dining room chair to catch what happened next. When I returned, Sarah was fully dressed, standing by the door. Seeing me, she gave an apologetic smile. "Sorry. I was hoping to try your cooking, but something urgent came up at work." The joy in her eyes was impossible to miss. John stood behind her, his usual calm demeanor restored. I pretended to want her to stay, then politely walked her to the door. John waved goodbye to her with a smile, as if nothing had happened. If I didn't know the truth, I would have thought they were just ordinary friends. That night, John suddenly became unusually attentive. He offered to help me with the wedding invitations and thank you gifts. I looked at him and let out a cold laugh. "You've been busy all day? Take a break. I can handle it." I truly didn't want him touching any of my things. Just seeing that hypocritical face made me sick. I gripped the utility knife in my hand so tightly that I almost couldn't stop myself from imagining erasing him from this world. But John seemed not to notice, patiently sealing each envelope with wax. After a while, he suddenly hugged me from behind, his voice full of unease. "Honey, we'll be happy, won't we?" If I didn't know about him and Sarah, maybe I would have believed he truly loved me. I replied indifferently. He then started explaining unnecessarily. "That was the colleague I told you about when she first joined the company. She's improved a lot lately and wanted to thank me. Every time she invites me to lunch, I turn her down because I know I have a wife, and I should keep my distance." Every word out of his mouth was just noise to me now. I clenched my teeth as I cut each wedding invitation, as if I were cutting him into pieces. Later, when it was time for bed, John unusually suggested we sleep in the main bedroom again. I used the excuse of being tired to avoid him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, climbing into bed and wrapping his arms tightly around me. When he touched me, my skin crawled and my mind went blank. I lay stiff in his arms, listening to his breathing slowly even out. Once he was asleep, I slipped out of bed, took the tablet into the bathroom, and played the recording. John's voice was filled with anger. "What are you doing? What do you want? If this keeps up, we'll have to cut off contact." Sarah was crying. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here. I just love you too much." Her voice was broken with sobs. Maybe John felt sorry for her because his voice softened, coaxing her. Moments later, I heard the sound of them kissing. My whole body trembled, emotions boiling inside me. John's voice was gentle. "As long as you don't leave me, I won't leave you. What we have is beyond that marriage certificate. Sarah, you know I love you." I set the tablet down, went into the kitchen, and wrapped my hand around a gleaming knife catching the moonlight. But I forced myself to stop, poured a glass of cold water instead, and transferred the recording to my phone. It wasn't time to act yet. I needed to endure a little longer. In the days that followed, John seemed to watch me closely, making a show of leaving and coming home on time, even placing his phone in plain sight to prove his faithfulness. Only after he saw me treating him as usual did he finally let his guard down. One evening over dinner, he suddenly said he had to go on a 3-day business trip. I casually replied, "A site inspection, right?" He brushed it off with, "Yeah. If you miss me, just video call me." The truth was, it was his presence at home that made me feel suffocated. During this time, I had gathered some information about Sarah. I found out she had a boyfriend in California, a lawyer named Robert Murphy. He was well off, from a good family. They had held a wedding ceremony but never registered the marriage. As luck would have it, her boyfriend had just arrived in New York. I decided to meet him. After a phone call where I explained my reasons, Robert agreed without hesitation. Compared to John's handsome appearance, Robert had a strong, imposing presence, more like a bodyguard than a lawyer. He greeted me politely, then got straight to the point. "You say Sarah's messing with your marriage. Got any proof?" I showed him the photos and videos I had taken over the past weeks. Robert was clearly someone experienced. He went through everything calmly, without the slightest change in expression. When he was done, he thanked me. "All right, I understand." Our first meeting lasted only a few sentences. Before leaving, he handed me his business card. "If you need help later, contact me. These photos and videos won't hold up in court. They're considered private. When the time comes, I'll provide the necessary evidence." When John returned from his so-called business trip, he looked increasingly worn down. I still treated him with the same false warmth, greeting him with a smile. I knew perfectly well he hadn't gone on any business trip. 2 days ago had been Sarah's birthday. They had certainly spent it together. Now, when I pictured the two of them, my heart felt strangely calm. John sat in the living room, his face clouded with gloom. I went to the bedroom and took from a hidden drawer a phone I had kept out of sight. On the screen was still the message I had sent to his company's board of directors, with attached photos of him and Sarah together. I had made it clear that if they didn't fire Sarah, I would release the images publicly. I knew that in business, people weigh profits above all else, and Sarah's skills weren't exceptional enough to make her worth keeping. From the living room, I heard John's phone ring again. His footsteps moved lightly toward the bathroom. I quietly followed, and as expected, Sarah's voice came through from the other end of the line. "It was my carelessness, but I don't regret it. As long as it doesn't affect you, I'm not afraid of anything." Her words caught me off guard. I had thought she would blame him, maybe even get angry. But clearly, Sarah was more cunning than I'd assumed. Not that it mattered. The more she played the understanding victim, the more it would eat at John's conscience. Exactly what I wanted. That night, John came into the main bedroom again. Hearing him, I pretended to be half asleep, shifting to make room for him on the bed. "Did I wake you?" he asked, his voice lacking sincerity but still carrying its usual gentle tone. I shook my head, thought for a moment, then said, "I've noticed you haven't been in a good mood lately. Let's go out for a change of scenery. We can visit your parents." John's lips pressed tightly together, his eyes showing a complicated expression, as if there were 1,000 things he wanted to say but decided against. I pretended not to notice. His parents had always been good at putting on a facade. I knew they didn't like me, but whenever they saw me, they acted warm and cheerful. In the past, whenever John and I had an argument, his mother would have no problem sending messages in the family group chat criticizing me. She never stopped praising her son's excellence, insisting every problem was my fault. Even the fact that I used my own money to support John's company didn't please her. That was exactly why I wanted revenge on John, because his whole family wasn't any better than he was. The town where John's parents lived was over an hour's drive from where we lived now. We didn't tell them in advance because John wanted to surprise them. Sure enough, when they saw us, his mother gripped his hand tightly, emotional. Even though it was late, she went into the kitchen to prepare a lavish dinner. I could tell John wanted to talk to his parents about something, so I deliberately ate slowly under their irritated gazes. After finishing, I smiled and excused myself to the bedroom. Once inside, I pretended to sleep, but my ears stayed alert. Lying with my back to the door, I felt someone quietly push it open, stand there for a moment, then leave. Immediately after, I heard his mother's voice, dripping with bitterness. If she wasn't rich, I'd never have let my son marry her. His father, Hunter, quickly murmured, "Keep your voice down, or she'll hear you." I smirked. Then John's voice came, tense with barely restrained anger. "I don't want to be married anymore." The living room fell silent. His mother's voice came back, now full of surprise. "Why?" John said nothing. His father spoke, calmer. "For what reason?" "I don't love her anymore," he shouted, trying to control himself but unable to hide his fury. "I'm in love with someone else." Hearing him say with his own mouth that he no longer loved me, I didn't feel hurt at all. On the contrary, the thought that I was about to be free, that I wouldn't have to keep pretending to be the perfect wife, made me feel lighter. The living room stayed silent for a long while. Haley repeated his words. "You love someone else? Does she have more money than Sophie's family?" John said nothing. His mother continued, "I don't care who you love, but you can't get divorced right now. With the amount of money she's invested in your company—" She trailed off, but everyone understood. Hunter cut in. "Who you love is your business, but don't let Sophie find out. Don't make a scene. If Sophie pulls her investment, the company will go bankrupt." The more I listened, the more I wanted to laugh. What a family. They were all shameless in exactly the same way. The next morning during breakfast, John texted me, "Honey, tonight I have dinner plans with Parker and everyone. I'll head back to the city first." Parker was our college classmate. That night, around 9 o'clock, I was lying in bed scrolling through Instagram when I suddenly came across Parker's latest post. It was an ordinary photo. 6 people sitting around a dinner table, everyone smiling. Even John, who rarely smiled these days, had a brightness in his eyes. Among the 6, I knew them all. The only woman in the photo was Sarah. She was seated next to John. They weren't showing any overt affection, but his body leaned slightly toward her. I was about to zoom in when the post disappeared. For reasons I couldn't explain, I decided to drive to our new apartment to check. Before leaving, I texted John saying I felt unwell, maybe coming down with something. He didn't reply. I waited downstairs, still holding on to a shred of fragile hope. I told myself that no matter how awful John could be, surely he wouldn't bring his mistress into the home I had worked so hard to create. Just then, headlights from the gate swept across the lot. A car rolled to a stop not far from me, and out stepped a man and a woman. The night air in the city was colder than usual. I watched John take off his coat and drape it over Sarah's shoulders. I was exhausted, too drained even to argue. Without thinking, I called Robert. Not long after, another car entered the gate. Robert had arrived. Dressed in a hoodie and jeans, he looked younger than when we first met. He strode quickly toward the building. I stayed in my car, waiting. Soon, the lights in the apartment flicked on, and raised voices triggered the motion-activated lights in the hallway. I saw more and more neighbors turning on their lights and stepping out to see what was going on. Taking advantage of the commotion, I slipped upstairs. My apartment door was wide open. Robert stood in the doorway, his eyes cold as he faced the panicked couple inside. Sarah's face was flushed, her hair a mess. John had a lipstick mark still smudged on his lips and a hickey on his neck. No one needed an explanation for what was happening. John's face tightened with irritation. He tried to keep calm, but his voice came out stiff. "We're just co-workers, that's it." I'd never realized how stubborn he could be. Sarah, flustered, spoke up. "We've already broken up." Robert raised an eyebrow, his tone flat. "The issue is, you're interfering in a legally protected relationship. You will be held accountable." As soon as he finished, a woman I didn't recognize suddenly rushed in and slapped Sarah twice, hard enough to make her stumble. John immediately pulled Sarah into his arms to shield her. The neighbors watching grew even more eager to take pictures. I took the chance to capture a shot of the two of them in each other's arms. Then I quietly left. I waited for Robert downstairs. About 10 minutes later, when the crowd had dispersed, he walked out slowly. At first, he headed straight toward his car, but then he stopped, turned, and came toward me. It seemed he had known I was there the whole time. I felt a flicker of embarrassment. He stepped up, tapped lightly on my car window, and spoke in an even tone. "Whether you divorce now or after the wedding, the settlement you receive will be the same." He was giving me professional advice. I knew he meant well. Divorcing right after the marriage registration would spare me further damage. But I shook my head and replied, "The wedding will happen." On the wedding day, John's board members and colleagues would be there, along with his entire family. The chance to expose him and Sarah in front of everyone would only come once. The pain they had caused me, I intended to return 100-fold, 1,000-fold. As I said it, I realized Robert was also someone wounded by all this. Hiring him as my lawyer might itself be a cruel thing to do to him. I glanced at him briefly. Reading the thought in my eyes, Robert gave a small smile, his features softening. "Don't look at me like that. I'm fine," he added. "In fact, I should thank you." Then he stood. "I have things to take care of. If you need anything else, just reach out." Robert got into his car and drove away. I smiled to myself and thought, I'm fine. The closer it got to the wedding day, the less John smiled, and the time he gave me became even scarcer than those smiles. Watching his face grow more and more gaunt only improved my mood. The wedding day arrived. I woke early and followed every step of the plan. Everyone congratulated me, and I truly felt happy when I thought about what was about to happen. The hall was packed with guests, the large screen at the center of the stage playing our wedding photos. I stood quietly at the entrance, watching everything unfold. Just as the lights suddenly went out, the images on the screen changed. Our wedding photos were replaced with a series of pictures of John and Sarah on dates, even shots of them entering a hotel together. The entire hall fell silent. The MC froze in place. John's parents went into a frenzy, rushing up to try to shut off the projector. John stood frozen beside the stage. When the slideshow ended, the screen switched to Sarah's face, followed immediately by the audio from a recording, her and John tangled together. His mother, furious beyond control, collapsed and fainted on the spot. Amid the rising noise of the crowd's gossip, I quietly walked away. Our humiliating wedding ended to the sound of ambulance sirens. I never saw John again. I left all matters in Robert's hands. He didn't go into detail about the process, only told me that I'd been awarded nearly all of John's assets in the settlement. The last time I saw John was the day we went to court for the divorce. In just over a month, he had withered, unshaven, stripped of the charm he once had. When he saw me, he seemed to lose his mind, lunging toward me. "Honey, please let me explain." I stepped aside, my eyes full of disgust and contempt. He froze, looking more vacant than he had on our wedding day. Outside the courthouse, he still trailed after me. "I've broken up with Sarah. Honey, give me another chance, please." I'd heard that what happened at the wedding had hit the news and gone viral online. Sarah had been viciously attacked by netizens, her identity even being hunted down. I frowned and walked past John. Just then, a black SUV stopped in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing Robert's steady, resolute face. "Get in!" Without hesitation, I opened the door, leaving John standing there, dazed. In the rearview mirror, his figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared, just like the love between us. I turned my eyes forward and happened to meet Robert's slightly concerned gaze. I smiled. "Don't look at me like that. I'm fine." Robert blinked, then burst out laughing. "I've always believed unhappiness is only temporary. Traitors will never meet a good end. In this world, everything balances out in the end.